Okay, so Geshe, I would like to begin by revising a bit what we taught in our last class. We're in the section of karma. We still have some remaining material to present. However, it's very good to give a revision. You might think it's a repetition, but it's actually very good to refresh our memory on those main points. And the other thing is that all of those things are applicable on a daily practice. All right, so let's give an overview. We know here that we're following a couple of texts. One is The Essence of Refined Gold, and the other one is The Lines of Experience by Lam Tsongkhapa. And we have been looking at the material that is relevant to the individual of the small scope. So all this material is Lam Rim. This is the abbreviated title, if you want, of all these types of texts. That in reality, the whole the way that the title is the graduated path to enlightenment. So enlightenment refers to the final goal, and the graduated path really are the different levels or the stages we have to traverse in order to reach that final goal. So in terms of the stages of the path here, we're looking at three major stages, which is the practices that are shared with the individual of the small scope, shared with the individual of the middle scope, and practices of the individual of the great scope. So these are the graduated stages that will lead to enlightenment. However, if you want to practice the Lam Rim, it is important that you rely upon a teacher. And to rely upon a teacher, you must find a qualified teacher. The Vinaya gives us a list of 10 qualities that a fully qualified teacher should have. So ideally, you should look for a teacher that has the full list of 10 qualities. However, even if you cannot find someone who has all 10 qualities, at the very minimum, the teacher you rely upon should have 3 qualities. And these 3 qualities refer to the 3 types of higher training, which is training in ethics, training in concentration, and training in wisdom. So we want to see the teacher having undergone through this type of training. So first of all, the training of ethics or morality. This is very important because this is the means of controlling, subduing our mind. In terms of ethics, we have 3 types of ethics: the ethics of accumulating virtue, the ethics of guarding virtue, and the ethics of benefiting other sentient beings. So we have to understand that due to our attachment for various objects, we engage in physical and verbal activities that are inappropriate. We are constantly distracted and do the wrong things. So it is important to apply some discipline and be able to discipline or restrain the senses, because this is where distraction is coming from. So we can see that morality is very important. First of all, we have to accumulate, meaning we have to create new types of virtue. Then we have to safeguard whatever we have and try to increase it. And then on the basis of this, we can start benefiting other sentient beings. Once you have morality, morality is like the basis, the foundation. On the basis or on top of this foundation, you can then cultivate concentration. Often we describe the mind as a monkey, right? So it's very agile and it jumps from place to place. You might be sitting here, right here on this chair. However, your mind is going to a lot of places, right? So it is very important that we develop concentration, and we will be able to direct the mind exactly to whatever object we are studying or whatever activity we are doing. On the basis of concentration, we then need to develop wisdom, which is the 3rd type of training. Wisdom is indispensable. Without developing wisdom, without training in wisdom, it will be very difficult to reach the state of liberation and omniscience. By developing wisdom, we develop antidotes to the main afflictions that we have, such as self-cherishing and, most importantly, self-grasping. So we can eliminate those, right? So as we say, the teacher here, if you want to practice the Lam Rim, it is important to rely on a teacher. The teacher should have at least these 3 types of training. So this concept of a teacher is very important. Even in an ordinary classroom, we know how important the role of a teacher is. The teacher is there to give you guidance, to give you the skills that you need in order to make the right decisions and progress in your life in general. And in particular, in Buddhism, the teacher, the spiritual teacher, is someone who will guide you along the path that leads to enlightenment. So once you understand that how important the teacher is in terms of your practice, you invite the teacher as to represent the merit field in front of you. And we said there are different systems of doing this. The most beneficial for us is to invite the teacher, seeing him as the embodiment of all the objects of refuge, and then proceed to worship through the 7-limb prayer practices, make offerings, and so forth. Continuing that, in terms of relying on the teacher, we rely in terms of action, we rely in terms of thought. In terms of thought, we need to generate faith and respect on the teacher, and also we need to remember the kindness of the teacher and appreciate him in this way. So before actually relying on the teacher, we say that it is very important to thoroughly examine the quality and the character of the teacher, and because we need to ascertain whether the teacher has this list of qualities that qualify him or her to be a teacher. But it's not just the teacher that must have a list of qualities, the students as well must have qualities. Most importantly, the students must be free from the 3 types of fault, and also the students must have a list of 10 or 20 qualities. All right, so we say that first of all, we need to rely on the teacher, and this is the root of the path, which is a very, very important heading as an outline to understand the root of the path is reliance on the teacher. And then once we have relied on the teacher, there is the way to train along the path. And when we begin with this subject, first of all, what we have is encouragement or motivation to extract the essence of this life. And the way that this is presented is talking about how we have obtained the precious human rebirth. And now that we have obtained it, we should understand that this is a great opportunity and do something meaningful with it. So within this presentation, we talk about the full list of freedoms and endowments. We have 8 freedoms that are freedoms from 8 different types of oppressive situations. And then we have the 10 endowments, 5 that come from our side and 5 that are provided by others. In addition to that, we have obtained this maturational result of the precious human rebirth. Not only do we have the 8 freedoms, the 10 endowments, but also we have the 8 excellent attributes of maturation. Okay, so as we say, this type of precious human rebirth is extremely meaningful and very rare to find. When we say it is extremely meaningful, what we refer to is that we have come into this life with this incredible sense, with this incredible, let's say, collection of qualities, opportunities, freedoms, endowments, and so forth. And this is the best basis for practicing Dharma. So we need to rejoice for having come into this life with all this freedom and all this opportunity. Now, the other thing to consider is that this life is difficult to find. So we should not take it for granted that we will get another precious human rebirth next time around. It is this type of rebirth is difficult to find in terms of cause. We can establish it is difficult to find by means of an example. We can establish it is meaningful to find by means of its nature. First of all, it is difficult to find due to the causes that establish it. To obtain a precious human rebirth, you must practice perfect morality. You must combine this with a perfect practice of the 6 perfections. And at the end, you must complement all this with stainless, perfect prayers. So it becomes difficult to accumulate these causes. to establish this type of rebirth. So, as we say, having obtained all this, it is very important that we do the best with our life by practicing Dharma. So, in the Lam Rim, this is presented by reflecting on 4 topics. The first one is that we must practice Dharma. The reason why it is necessary to practice Dharma is because all living beings wish to have happiness, and nobody wishes to have suffering. So if you wish to have happiness, the main method, the main pathway that brings about happiness is the practice of Dharma. Also, if you wish to avoid suffering, the main method of avoiding negativity or purifying negativity is Dharma. Okay, the second point to contemplate is whether or not we have the capacity. Are we capable of practicing Dharma? And categorically, we say that we are capable of practicing Dharma because we have the most favorable external and internal condition. Internally, we have the freedoms and endowments, and externally, we have found a teacher that we rely upon. Therefore, we are totally capable of practicing Dharma. The third point to contemplate is that Dharma must be practiced in this life. Why? Because there is no guarantee what sort of rebirth we might have in our next life. There's no guarantee you will get another life like this next time around. The fourth point to contemplate is, having said, okay, we need to practice Dharma, I am capable of practicing Dharma, yes, I will do it in this life. Then the question is, when in this life? Because there are people who say, look, when I'm young, right, when I'm very young, whatever, I have other things in mind, I will wait until retirement, let's say, and then I will have time, and then I will do it. So the fourth point to understand is that we need to practice Dharma right now. And the reason for that is because there's no certainty with death. We do not know when death will strike. So those 4 points are very important to contemplate because they put an end to laziness. And in particular, they emphasize this urgency that we need to practice Dharma right now.
Awesome.
So we say it's important to make this life with all the freedoms and endowments, to make this life meaningful, to make something important in this life. So to make the life meaningful actually does not come from external material things, let's say wealth and money and enjoyments. Of course, you might have some money and for a day you go out and have a nice day for yourself. You go to a restaurant, you have some good food, and you feel that satisfaction. You feel like you've done something today. But this is a feeling that only lasts, let's say, half an hour or so, and then it fades away. It is not stable. This is not what makes our life meaningful. What makes our life meaningful is the practice of Dharma. Also, antagonizing others, fighting with others, criticizing others, trying to overcome or destroy your perceived enemies. These are not things that make your life meaningful. Actually, these things create a lot of suffering for yourself. They make you unhappy. You yourself make yourself unhappy. So we have to be very careful about not retaliating and not antagonizing others. Even if someone is behaving badly towards ourselves, we should be able to restrain ourselves and say, I will not retaliate, I will not antagonize. If I do this, I collect negativity for myself. This is only the cause for making me unhappy. So make sure you make the life meaningful through the practice of Dharma. Okay, so the next thing, therefore, is how to extract the essence of this life. And this is presented under the practices that are shared with the individual of the small scope, the practices that are shared with the individual of the middle scope, and the practices of the great scope. So under the practices that are shared with the individual of the small scope, the first subject that is discussed is death and impermanence. having talked about how we have obtained the precious human rebirth, one might think, well, now that I obtained this precious human rebirth, perhaps that thing is stable. It's a stable state. However, this is untrue because our lives, our bodies, and so forth deteriorate momentarily. Therefore, we have to consider death and impermanence. So in the subject of death, we consider how death is certain, how the actual time of death is uncertain. As we say, the body and life deteriorates momentarily, so we are not sure when the actual death will occur, and that at the time of death, only Dharma can be of benefit. So at the time of death, we will have to separate from relatives, from friends, from wealth, even from this body that we have cherished all our lives. So none of these things are of benefit. Only Dharma is benefit at the time of death. Okay, so we talk about death and impermanence. In terms of impermanence, of course, we present this in two levels. You can talk about subtle impermanence and you can talk about coarse impermanence. So here, death is coarse. It refers to coarse impermanence. The thing is that we all die. Ordinary beings like ourselves, we have no control whatsoever. But we even see that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they pass away. Because all of those cases that we mention are impermanent entities, and an impermanent being will definitely undergo death. In our case, death occurs due to the power of karma and afflictions. And the thing is that there is nothing we can do to prolong our life. We come into this life with a certain lifespan. So let's say your lifespan is 80 years. There is nothing you can do. It doesn't matter how many modes you have about it. It doesn't matter how many pujas you do for your life. There is nothing you can do to prolong the life beyond 80 years, right? You cannot make your life 100 years or 120 years long. It doesn't matter what methods you employ. You cannot prolong the lifespan. All the methods that we have, plus the pujas and practices and so forth, they are there to remove obstacles. So let's say you have a lifespan for 80 years, but there are some obstacles that might reduce your life, let's say to 70 years, and then you do all the pujas and take medicine and vitamins and healthy lifestyle and so forth. So you remove those obstacles so you can live up to the 80 years, right? So we need to understand this. You cannot prolong the lifespan. Okay, so once we present the subject of death, the next thing that is presented to us that as Buddhists, we say that once you pass away, once you die, you definitely have to take another rebirth. And if you have to take another rebirth, there are only two possibilities, either a higher rebirth or a lower rebirth. So here we actually have to really admire this very clear presentation we have by Lama Tsongkhapa in the Lam Rim, because it makes it very clear to follow this logical order for beginner practitioners, right? So first he talks about death, and then once he explains death, he says, okay, now after death, what will happen? Either you have a good rebirth or you have a bad rebirth. So it's a very logical presentation. In other religious systems, there are different ideas about what happens after death. Some say that upon dying, you obtain the state of liberation. Others say that the God pulls you up in heaven, and so forth. Scientists examine but do not give any specific answer in this question. However, here we say that once you die, there are only two options. Either you will have a good rebirth or you will have a bad rebirth. The suffering of the lower rebirth is presented in the small scope, and the suffering of the higher rebirth is presented in the middle scope. So in the small scope, we discuss the suffering of the three lower migrations, and we talk about the causes that establish this type of rebirth. So we say, depending on the severity of or the heaviness of your negative karma, for the heaviest karma, negative karma, you will be reborn in the hell realms. Middle level of negativity will bring about rebirth in the hungry ghost realm, and lighter negativity brings rebirth in the animal realm. Okay, so when we present the suffering of the three lower migrations, the thing is to reflect on the suffering, and that should bring you to the conclusion that you want to avoid the 10 non-virtuous actions, and you want to establish the 10 virtuous actions that are the opposite of them. Having presented the suffering of the lower migrations, the next subject is refuge. And refuge here is presented in 3 levels, because we have the refuge of the individual of the small scope, the refuge of the individual of the middle scope, and the refuge of the individual of the great scope. So in terms of the refuge of the small scope, here the individual is terrified of the suffering of the 3 lower migrations, and therefore is seeking to obtain a higher rebirth as a god or a human, and has the faith of belief in the capacity of the objects of refuge to protect from these fears and these types of suffering. For the refuge of the middle scope, the individual is afraid of the entirety of samsara, the suffering that exists in the whole of samsara, and has the faith of belief that the 3 objects of refuge have the power to protect one from these types of suffering. And finally, for the refuge of the great scope, here the individual is considering the well-being of all sentient beings, thinking that they should be protected from knowledge obscurations and the fear that this brings about, and at the same time believes that the objects of refuge have the power to protect from these types of fear. So refuge is an extremely important subject. It's something that we should cultivate and meditate upon every day. We need to understand that the objects of refuge are 3 objects, external objects. However, refuge itself is something that exists within our own continuum. So refuge is, the nature of refuge is awareness existing within our own mind. Indeed, it comes from the combination of very strong fear and at the same time the faith of belief in the capacity of the objects of refuge to protect from the fear. So having talked about refuge, in the Lam Rim, we have many subheadings, if you want, in refuge. Definitely, we have the benefits of going for refuge, and we have the commitments or the training that comes with refuge. And within that, the commitment and the training that comes with refuge, we go into the presentation of karma, the karmic law of cause and effect. So again, this presentation of karma is something which is more or less unique to Buddhism. Most of the other religious systems, they do not talk about karma. They talk about a God creator. In Buddhism, we do not accept a God creator. Okay, so when we talk about karma or the karmic law of cause and effect, we refer to the fact that whatever happiness or suffering we experience in this life is the result of karma. When we talk about karma, we have 4 principles. First of all, that karma is certain. And certain here, it means that the result of karma is certain. If you engage in non-virtuous activities, the result is certain to be suffering. If you engage in virtuous activities, the result is certain to be happiness. So there is certainty in terms of the result of karma. The second principle is that karma increases, which means that a very small action, whether it is positive or negative, actually can bring about significant results. The third one is you will not meet with karma you have not created. So if you haven't done something, you would not experience the resultant consequences of that. And the fourth one is that once created, karma does not go to waste, meaning you cannot escape. There is a result, and you will have to experience the result of that karma. Okay, so going into the essence of refined gold, we're at the bottom of page 16. It says, by guarding the ethical conduct of avoiding the 10 known virtues, you will have a good rebirth. But if you wish to go beyond that and gain the 8 qualities conducive to continuing along the supreme path to omniscience, qualities such as good rebirth, a good family, a strong mind, and a harmonious body, then also create their causes. So it says, in addition to having obtained the precious human rebirth, if you want to have those 8 maturational results, which are mentioned here as the 8 qualities, then this is something which is worthwhile. Having these 8 qualities allow you to continue along the supreme path. And the supreme path is the path that leads to omniscience. So in that list of 8 special qualities, we have things such as excellent lifespan, excellent appearance, excellent lineage, excellent power, having trustworthy words, being renowned as having great power, and so forth. So to do this, you must actually establish, to have these type of qualities, you must establish their causes. So it says, then you must also create their causes. So abandoning harming any living beings, make offerings of light and so forth to the 3 jewels, give clothes, etc. to the needy. By overcoming pride, have respect for all that lives. So it doesn't matter how high your position is. Even if you are a king, you must treat others with respect and put yourself in a low position. And take responsibility of these practices into your own hands through the forces of conscientiousness and mindfulness. Okay, so it says, continues, however, if occasionally strong mental afflictions overpower you and you commit a breach of practice, do not be apathetic, but confess the unwanted karmic obstacle at the proper time and place, and by means of the 4 opponent powers, cleanse all stains of body, speech, and mind. Okay, so it says occasionally we might be overpowered by afflictions, and it says here we might commit a breach of practice. So a breach of practice for the lay people definitely refers to engaging in any of the 10 non-virtuous actions. So the 3 of the body, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, the 4 of speech, which is lying, harsh words, divisive speech, and idle gossip, and the 3 of the mind, which is harmful intent, covetousness, and wrong views. Of course, for the ordained, we have downfalls from the vows that they have. So if any of those things occur, so if you commit a breach of practice, do not leave it as it is. Do not be apathetic, because negativity actually increases if you leave it like this. But instead, you need to confess the unwanted karmic obstacles at the proper time and place. So the way that we do this is by relying on the 4 opponent powers. The first one is the power of repudiation. So it says contemplating the shortcomings of the non-virtue in order to develop remorse for having committed negativity. So repudiation here means you regret, you have remorse. So you go back and you think, you try to remember what you have done during the course of the day, and you're mortified because you said, oh, I did this to this person, or I said that to that person. Oh, that was not okay. That is not acceptable. So that is the power of regret. The second one is applying the antidote. So there are said to be 6 different types of antidotes that we can apply, and that includes doing different types of recitation, doing prayers, or worshiping the objects of representations of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, the objects of refuge, and so forth. The next one is generating the strong determination to turn away from such negative course of action in the future. So this is the power of restraint. So you say, I will never do that thing again, even if my life is at stake. And finally, we have relying upon the base. The base here is relying upon the objects of refuge and bodhicitta as forces with the power to purify the mind of karmic stains. So we continue here in the essence of refined gold. We find the quotation from the relevant verse from Je Rinpoche's Lines of Experience, where he says, should you not find a suitable rebirth, it will not be possible to progress along the path. Cultivate the causes of a higher rebirth. Appreciate the importance of purifying the 3 doors from stains of non-virtue. Cherish the force of the 4 opponent powers. Very important here, the point of needing to obtain a precious human rebirth that has the full set of 8 freedoms and 10 endowments. If you do not obtain this type of rebirth, it is very difficult to progress along the path that leads to the state of omniscience. Therefore, if this type of rebirth is necessary, then you must cultivate the causes of a higher rebirth. So you must understand what are the causes and train in these causes and establish these causes. Then it says, appreciate the importance of purifying the 3 doors from stains of non-virtue and cherish the force of the 4 opponent powers, because of course this is what sabotages us from establishing this. And then it says, by meditating in this manner, the mind will turn away from the transient things of this life and take genuine interest in more lasting things. When this effect has been realized, you will be known as a spiritual aspirant of initial capacity. So by meditating in this way, the mind turns away from transient things of this life. So you overcome or you reverse attraction to this life. So you're not anymore attracted to things such as fame and reputation and wealth for this life. If you overcome attraction for these things, it means you are more interested about your next life. But again, it's not that you're interested, let's say, in the fame and the wealth and all those things again in the next life. Rather, you are interested in obtaining a higher rebirth as a god or a human, as a means for progressing towards a state of omniscience. So once you have trained your mind to think in this way, you can say that you are someone who is practicing, who are an individual of the small scope. You're doing the practices that are shared with the individual of the small scope. So today is the last class of the year, the last class of the semester. As you can see, we finished the practices that are shared with the individual of the small scope. The most important thing is to maintain awareness of all these subjects and engage in meditation every day to remind yourself of all these subjects. The most important thing is that our minds become relaxed, but at the same time, we have recollection, we have awareness of these issues, and if we can maintain this, then we establish a happy life. So make sure you go over those subjects of refuge, of death and impermanence, of refuge, of the law of cause and effect, and so forth. So Geshe, I would like to thank you very much for this class, having the opportunity to lead this class. So Geshe was saying from my side, I'm not a great scholar, a great practitioner. I don't know much about it, but I have received the transmission and teachings from His Holiness the Dalai Lama on Lam Rim. Then what we need to keep in mind is that in the monastery, we don't really have the opportunity to read or study the Lam Rim much. We study other subjects. So having to teach this class was an excellent opportunity for me to take my time and read on the Lam Rim. So I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to do that. So Geshe, I would like to thank the 3 directors, acting directors of Drop a Link for the amazing effort and work that you do. But of course, it's not just these 3 people. There are a lot of members who do very important work in order to run the center and have these classes. In addition to that, the committee, the members, and everyone who works so hard. Geshe says, I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I am so impressed with all the work that you do. And it's important to recognize here that in Singapore, we have those favorable conditions, and your work goes towards supporting and benefiting the people of Singapore. So providing such a great service to the Singaporean community, allows you to accumulate vast amount of merit. So Geshe says, I'm really impressed and thank you very much. Last, the translator. Great, thanks to the translator.
That